The problem of woman. I wish to speak to you about the problem of woman, a problem as old as mankind in appearance, but infinitely older in origin. For if we want to find the law that governs and solves it, we must go back to the origin of the universe, even beyond creation. Some of the most ancient traditions, perhaps even the most ancient, ascribe the cause of the creation of the universe to the will of a supreme absolute to manifest by his own self-objectification, and the first act of this objectification was said to be the emanation of the creative consciousness. Now, these ancient traditions usually speak of the absolute in the masculine gender, and of the consciousness in the feminine, thus making this primordial gesture the origin of the differentiation between man and woman, and at the same time giving a kind of priority to the masculine over the feminine. In fact, although they are one, identical and coexistent before the manifestation, the masculine took the original decision and emanated the feminine to carry it out, which amounts to saying that while there is no creation without the feminine, neither is there any feminine manifestation without the previous decision of the masculine. We could certainly ask whether this explanation is not a little too human, but, to tell the truth, all the explanations that men can give must always necessarily be human, at least in their formulation, for, in their spiritual ascent towards the unknowable and unthinkable, certain exceptional individuals have been able to transcend human nature and identify themselves with the object of their seeking in a sublime and, in a way, unformulable experience. But as soon as they sought to share the benefit of their discovery with others, they had to formulate it, and in order to be comprehensible, their formula had, of necessity, be human and symbolic. We could also ask whether these experiences and their disclosure are responsible for the sense of superiority which man nearly always feels towards woman, or whether, on the contrary, is this widespread sense of superiority that is responsible for the form given to the experiences. In any case, the indisputable fact remains: man feels superior and wants to dominate. Woman feels oppressed and revolts, openly or secretly, and the eternal quarrel between the sexes is perpetuated from age to age, identical in essence, innumerable in its forms and hues. Of course, man throws the whole blame on woman, just as woman throws the entire blame on man. In truth, the blame should be equally distributed between the two, and neither can boast of being superior to the other. Moreover, until this notion of superiority and inferiority is eliminated, nothing and no one can put an end to the misunderstanding that divides the human species into two opposite camps, and the problem will not be solved. So many things have been said and written on this problem. It has been approached from so many angles that a whole volume would not be enough to expound all its aspects. Generally speaking, the theories are excellent, or, in any case, all have their own virtues, but the practice has proved less successful, and I do not know whether from the point of view of realization we have made any headway since the Stone Age. For in their mutual relationships, man and woman are once rather despotic masters, and somewhat pitiable slaves to each other. Yes, slaves. For so long as one has desires, preferences, and attachments, one is a slave of these things, and of the people on whom one is dependent for their satisfaction. Thus, woman is enslaved to man, because of the attraction she feels for the male and his strength, because of the desire for a home and the security it brings, and lastly, because of the attachment to motherhood. Man, too, on his side, is enslaved to woman, because of his possessiveness, his thirst for power and domination, because of his desire for sexual relations, and because of his attachment to the little comforts and conveniences of married life. That is why no law can liberate women, unless they liberate themselves. Likewise, men too, in spite of all their habits of domination, will cease to be slaves only when they have freed themselves from all inner enslavement. And this state of veiled struggle, often unavowed but always present in the subconscious, even in the best cases, seems unavoidable, unless human beings rise above their ordinary consciousness to identify themselves with the perfect consciousness and unite with the supreme reality. For as soon as one attains this higher consciousness, one realizes that the difference between man and woman reduces itself to a purely physical difference. As a matter of fact, there may have been on earth in the beginning a pure masculine type and a pure feminine type, each with its own special and clearly differentiated characteristics. But in the course of time, the inevitable mixture, heredity, all the sons that looked like their mothers, all the daughters that looked like their fathers, social progress, similar occupations, all this has made it impossible today to discover one of these pure types. All men are feminine in many respects, and all women are masculine in many traits, especially in modern societies. But unfortunately, because of the physical appearance, the habit of quarreling is perpetuated, perhaps even aggravated by a spirit of rivalry. In their best moments, both man and woman can forget their difference of sex, but it reappears at the slightest provocation. The woman feels she is a woman. The man knows he is a man, and the quarrel is revived indefinitely in one form or another, open or veiled, and perhaps all the more bitter the less it is admitted. And one wonders whether it will not be so until there is no longer any men and women, but living souls expressing their identical origin in sexless bodies. For one dreams of a world in which all these oppositions will at last disappear, and where a being will be able to live and prosper who will be the harmonious synthesis of all that is best in the human race, uniting conception and execution, vision and creation, in one single consciousness and action. Until such a happy and radical solution is reached, India remains, on this point as on many others, the land of violent and conflicting contrasts, which can nevertheless be resolved by a wide and comprehensive synthesis. Indeed, is it not in India we find the most intense adoration, the most complete veneration of the Supreme Mother, creatrix of the universe, conqueror of all enemies, mother of the gods and all the worlds, dispenser of all boons? And is it not in India, too, that we find the most radical condemnation, the uttermost contempt for the feminine principle, Prakriti, Maya, corrupting illusion, cause of every fall and every misery, nature that deceives and defiles and lures away from the divine? The whole life of India is shot through with this contradiction. She suffers from it in both mind and heart. Everywhere feminine deities are erected on her altars. The children of India await salvation and liberation from their mother Durga. And yet, is it not one of her children who said that the avatar would never incarnate in the body of a woman, because no right-minded Hindu would recognize him? Fortunately, the divine is not affected by such a narrow sectarian spirit, or moved by such petty considerations, and when it pleases him to manifest in a terrestrial body, he cares very little whether he is recognized by men. Besides, in all his incarnations, he seems always to prefer children and the simple hearts to the learned. In any case, until the manifestation of a new conception and consciousness compels nature to create a species which would no longer have to yield to the necessity of animal procreation, and thus be under the obligation of dividing into two complementary sexes, the best that can be done for the progress of the present human race is to treat both sexes on a footing of perfect equality, to give them the same education and training, and to teach them to find, through a constant contact with the divine reality that is above all sexual differentiation, the source of all possibilities and harmonies. And it may be that India, the land of contrasts, will also be the land of new realizations, even as she was the cradle of their conception. From the Mother on Education, originally from the Bulletin, April 1955.